What is going on, everyone? Today I'm going to be giving you my non-spoiler review for Jurassic World Rebirth, which just released. This is a film I was looking forward to for quite some time now. I've really been loving this franchise for the most part. There genuinely isn't a single film in it that I think is bad. There are definitely some, below average ones, but none that I think are bad. And I was so hyped to hear that Gareth Edwards was making the next Jurassic World movie because he is a director that I love through and through. I think especially from a visual standpoint, Gareth Edwards' previous films are beautiful. I mean, you got Star Wars Rogue One, you have Godzilla 2014, you have The Creator. Like, these are some incredible looking movies. And so I knew for a fact I was going to at least enjoy that aspect of this movie. And the trailers definitely got me even more excited because it all looked really, really good. So let's get into this review. We're gonna go through the positives and negatives, and I'll give the movie a rating out of 10. Starting off with the positives, like I said before, Gareth Edwards, his directing is incredible, and that is mostly centered around how beautiful the visuals are of this film. I really do think this is visually one of the best looking Jurassic World movies. I would say it's definitely better than the Jurassic World trilogy in terms of visuals. I mean, those movies look great, don't get me wrong, but I think this is even better, and I would expect it to be better considering we're in 2025 now, and like I said, Gareth Edwards directing, it made sense that they would be going really, really far with making it look as good as possible. I don't just mean the CGI, I also mean just the set pieces, the landscape, just the way it's shot. Everything looks so well. The lighting, not a single scene where I felt like anything looked off or weird or just not good. It all looked beautiful, every single moment. And there's pretty huge sections of this movie where I was just kind of in awe by how it looked. I really wish this movie was in IMAX though. I'm not going to use that as a negative because it's not really the movie's fault, but I would have loved to have seen this in IMAX. Unfortunately, it had to be in Dolby. Dolby's still great, but doesn't look as good as IMAX in my opinion. So it would have been fun to see it in IMAX, but regardless, like I said, the visuals are incredible. The way it's shot is great as well. I mean, there's so many shots that are just so cool. A lot of moments where they let the camera linger on a specific scene and they don't, cut it too much or they don't pull back. Like, there's a lot of scenes that you just get to watch something happen, and it always looks really good. They did a great job from that perspective. One of my favorite aspects of this film is the fact that they really did bring horror back to Jurassic World. And this is something that I feel like has been missing from this franchise since the original. Now, I do think there was a lot of horror elements in the later ones, just not nearly as much. It wasn't as prevalent. I mean, the Jurassic World trilogy was definitely more action centric. There really wasn't many horror moments, but this film does do a lot of horror moments. Now, I don't mean, nearly as much as maybe the original did, but pretty close to it at least. I mean, especially the opening scene, was actually one of the most terrifying things ever. And there's this whole scene out in the ocean that was also terrifying. There's a couple of scenes on the island as well. There's just so many different moments where I was genuinely terrified. And there was a lot of moments where I didn't feel like the characters were actually going to die in those instances, because I thought to myself, at the end of the day, this is a PG-13 movie. They probably won't kill off these characters, but sometimes they do. Sometimes with other characters, they don't. It really just depends, which kind of goes into my next positive. They actually did kill off a lot of people in this movie. Now, again, I'm not going to go into specifics because I don't want to spoil anything, but I was surprised to see how many people died in such brutal ways. Now, of course, people have died in the other Jurassic World movies, Jurassic Park movies. That's happened before, but it was just the way it happened. I think it was way more brutal in this movie. It was way scarier. So I really appreciated that. I appreciated them bringing the horror back to this franchise because dinosaurs are scary. They should be shown as that. There are, other dinosaurs that are completely non-violent, but there are ones that will tear you to pieces. And so showing that, I think, is important. Within keeping, the PG-13 rating. Obviously, they're not going to be showing gore and blood and all that, but it still looked incredible for what it was. I think it definitely added a lot to the tension and the horror of the movie. As I said before, the visuals are incredible, but the set pieces were also quite amazing. Just the creativity of them is what worked so well for me. Some of them we've kind of seen before, but I think some of them were really unique because we didn't get to see it in the same way. And for example, there's a lot of scenes out in the ocean in this movie. There's actually a big chunk of the movie that's just out in the ocean, and honestly, those scenes were some of my favorite scenes of the movie because it kind of felt like I was watching a Jaws movie, but instead of it being a shark, it's just these giant water dinosaurs. I don't know what they were called, I forget the name of them, but they were huge and it was incredible to watch. It really was probably some of the most tension filled scenes of the movie. And then there was also a scene where they were hanging off a cliff trying to get into this temple area that had this egg, and that scene was really intense because you had all these pterodactyls attacking them. And then there was a really intense scene involving a T-Rex on the water and a river that so many cool set pieces that they just knew what areas would make for the best scenes and what would make for the most amount of tension, and they went with it, and it worked 99% of the time. Another positive is the story of this movie itself. I actually quite like the premise of it. The whole idea is that they're going to this island with a bunch of dinosaurs, and they're trying to get these specific blood samples from specific dinosaurs on this island, and they want to use it to basically help create different like medicines and cures for different diseases. And it's an interesting premise to start the movie because it's just a very simple goal that they have, but trying to achieve that goal is obviously quite difficult. And I think it works as the premise. It's very different than some of the other movies because as far as I'm aware, I don't remember there being a plot just like that. You know, they're not trying to save the dinosaurs necessarily. They're trying to save humanity by making sure less people die from these various diseases that they're trying to cure. Now, the movie does also focus a bit on the aftermath of Jurassic World Dominion, which I did appreciate quite a bit. I thought they were just going to forget about that movie and just kind of like go past it, but they didn't. They made sure to acknowledge the fact that dinosaurs were quite literally all throughout the world in that movie, and they acknowledged it by being like, okay, well, the dinosaurs are now kind of dying. A lot of them aren't able to survive in the habitats that they were in around the world, so they kind of stick to the more tropical regions around the world, and one of those tropical regions, of course, was the island that they go to in this movie. But I like the fact that they focused on that even just a little bit, and I think that premise is, like I said, well handled. It's not too depth, it's not too complicated, and I think that works for a Jurassic World movie. One of my main complaints with Jurassic World Dominion was actually the exact opposite, that there was too much shit going on. Like, there were so many different plot lines, so many different story arcs, and it felt bloated. Whereas this movie is the kind of the exact opposite, where there's really not a lot to it. It's kind of just a very simple idea. Just they got to get in, get the blood from these dinosaurs, and get out. That's pretty much it. And I think it works in that way, though. The way these movies usually operate, it works to have a simple premise. But going into the negatives, I do think story-wise there was some problems, specifically with the characters. I don't think the characters are that great. I don't think they're bad by any means, but I don't think they're that great. They're very light on story. Like I said, I get having a simple premise for the movie, that's fine, but I think you have to add some depth to the characters, and I don't feel like these characters had much depth. They didn't really feel too connected to each other. I mean, there's this whole family in this movie, which I did like the scenes with the family. I actually like those scenes quite a bit, but they didn't really have much of a connection with any of the other characters in the movie because they were split up from those other characters for a majority of the movie. So there was really never this like connection between them. I think they should have stuck around more with the group long term, because then you would have had a bond grow between different characters. You could add interesting dynamics between different characters, but they never really had that. It kind of felt like this was two movies in one, where they kind of connect at different points in the movie. I'm not going to spoil out what points, but you know, they do kind of interconnect with each other. I just kind of felt like you should have had them connected the whole time, and I think the bonds between the characters would have been a bit better, and they needed more moments for the characters to just grow a bit more. There's a few I liked. There's the doctor character, the scientist. I liked him quite a bit. Scarlett Johansson's character, Zora, I believe was her name. She was cool, but she was just cool. Like, I didn't really care much about her beyond that. I didn't think she was this really deep character who had much of a personality, to be honest. She just kind of was there. She was cool because it's Scarlett Johansson, right? And it's nothing against her acting. She did a great job, but there wasn't enough depth to her character. Even Mahershala Ali's character, his name is Duncan in this movie, he doesn't really have a lot of depth. Like, there's one moment where he looks at his daughter. He had, I guess, like a picture of his daughter that he has kept with him, and he looked at that, and that's about it. That's all we really know about him. Like, you don't really go beyond that. All you really think about is, oh, he's a father, right? That's all that it does to you. And I guess it adds a little bit to the character, but they don't really do much with it beyond that, except there's other moments. There's like one moment where I felt like they did something with it. And I just, again, I felt like they need more with these characters to really get me to care more about them. And I just don't think they did enough of that. Some of the dialogue also didn't really do them many favors. Like I said, for Scarlett Johansson's character, I feel like she had a lot of moments where she was talking to the scientist, and the scientist was like giving her these big ideas that he had for what to do with this cure and what he wants to do with the world, like just kind of throwing out his ideologies and stuff. And she just kind of goes, yeah, that makes sense. Like, she doesn't ever give her opinion. Usually she just kind of like says, oh, yeah, I agree, even though like 20 minutes later she was saying the exact opposite. She doesn't really have like a growth to her character or like development. It's just kind of she's just going with the flow. And I don't know, I feel like there could have been more there that could have added to these characters and could have added to the depth of them, because they deserved more, to be honest. And the last negative I have, because to be honest, I don't think I have that many negatives, although that negative I just mentioned was pretty big, but this next negative is also kind of big, to be honest. There was a lot of moments in this movie where they had a really forced comedy, like extremely forced. And here's the problem, it never worked. I don't think I laughed once. Like maybe there was a couple moments I laughed in the movie, but it was never these specific moments. Like especially with this one character, he's the boyfriend of the daughter of the family of the movie, and nothing against the actor, he's totally fine, but they give him a lot of moments where like he's supposed to be doing something like kind of goofy and funny, and he's kind of like a jokester kind of character. It's never funny though. Like there was one line that he had about like a deathbed, that like something about, you know, older people buying you know, their last mattress and it being their deathbed. I'm not going to say the whole joke here, I don't want to spoil it for you, but it just, I was like, what? Like, okay, like there's just so many pieces of dialogue from him where it's like, that adds nothing to the scene, man. I don't know what's going on with that. But I did like some other things to do with this character. I really liked his story involving, like, he is this guy who he doesn't really think he deserves much, but at the same time he does. You know, he has a girlfriend and he just wonders why she's even with him, because he's just like kind of a reckless guy who just kind of talks too much and says a lot of stupid stuff. But I just don't think the comedy worked. Like they were trying to do comedy there, and it wasn't just him either. There was another moment earlier in the movie with the scientist involving a mint. Again, I'm not going to spoil the joke, but I was just like, all right, like this is going on for way too long and I'm not really laughing that much. I don't know, maybe I'm just a sad person who doesn't laugh enough, but I just feel like it was a lot of forced humor in this movie, and a lot of it didn't work, unfortunately. And I think, you know, it's okay if not all the jokes land, that's fine, but then stop trying to input this humor in places where it doesn't always belong. Like sometimes it feels like enforced moments. You got to have the humor be more organic. I'm such a fan of organic humor, unless you're doing like an Austin Powers movie or like a pure comedy, obviously. But if you're doing a movie that's not meant to be a comedy, the comedy should be integrated within the story and the situations the characters are in. You shouldn't try to force it the way this movie does, and I think it unfortunately does in a few places. But it wasn't a huge problem, it's just something that I noticed here or there. With that being said, I'm gonna give this movie a rating of 8 out of 10. I think it was a good movie. I was actually surprised to see so much hate for it. With the early reviews, the Rotten Tomato scores are pretty low. I do see a lot of people liking it as well, though. It's not just getting hate, but a lot more hate than I was expecting, because I do think this is a really good movie. I definitely think it has its flaws. I think the characters, like I said, could have been much better. The dialogue could have been much better, but that's about it. Visually speaking, this movie is pretty much perfect, and there's not a single issue there. I think the structure of the movie is good. I think the pacing's really good. I was never bored in the movie. So yeah, I definitely recommend you going to see this. Definitely one of my favorite Jurassic World movies. I don't think it's one of the best. I think Jurassic Park is still the best. I think Jurassic World is probably my second favorite. And then maybe Jurassic Park 2 is my third favorite. I really like that one. But I would say this is maybe like 4 or 5. Like it's definitely not towards the bottom of my list, probably somewhere in the middle. It's a decent film. I definitely recommend you go see it. If you guys enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. Peace out, everyone.